My, oh my. Never thought we'd see the day, everyone. But we made it. Dune Awakening Direct Episode 2. What a show it was. Now, if you happen to have missed it earlier today, let me catch you right up to speed, alright? We're going to start off with the vision of Paul Atreides. This is the story cinematic trailer put out earlier this week, discussing the alternate timeline that's going to be taking place in Dune Awakening. Big Bad Spice Daddy is no longer. There is no Kwisatz Haderach. There is no Muad'Dib in this game. He didn't make it. He was never born. All we are left with is Papa Leto Atreides, featured here. Look at that salt and pepper. Magnificent. Unfortunately, something happened to his skull and his jaw. I don't know what the deal is with that, but we don't have the focal point of the legendary Dune saga leading the charge here. We have a split going on, y'all. Feels so good. I, for one, am very excited about this story cinematic idea. The story that's going to be happening where we get to kind of weave our own narrative into the framework here. So let's discuss a little bit about how that's actually going to work. You can see here, the timeline is having a fray in it. Paul was never born. Instead, we get a female version of Paul. This is Arrakis. We get our first look at Lady Jessica, looking nice, still wearing the crazy gold stuff all over her face. I'm not sure who her stylist is, but I guess that's a look. She's being delivered, Arrakis Atreides, and we obviously are taking place on Caladan here, but it gets hit with the sands of Arrakis, metaphorically. It's awesome. So we can see here, loving mother looking down at her, no longer Mahdi child. And then we get a look at Lady Jessica as she grows older in the timeline. We see her here catching Dr. Yue in the act of his sedition. And you can see Leto's coming up. He's like, what's going on? And she's fitted with this kick-ass Bene Gesserit witch costume. And Leto's just kind of seems aloof about the whole thing, like he's not really bothered either way. But they stop Dr. Yue from the assassination attempt. It never happens. As you can see here in the demo, they start the game at Ecological Testing Site 197. Perhaps 40 hours into the game, Lady Jessica had a daughter, the events of the novel didn't happen, Dr. Yue was uncovered, the Atreides shield held, Harkonnen invaders pushed back, war came to Dune, but the factions are still in place and the sand animations look good. That's good to know. A lot of things have changed. The Sardaukar are now officially the police. You see that guy? And you remember this guy? That's actually a Sardaukar. We don't know if he's like a traitor Sardaukar, but homie's looking good. Personally, I'm so excited about this. The Harkonnen have committed some horrible, horrible acts of violence against the Fremen. The Fremen are quote-unquote missing now. Whether or not they're completely obliterated, we don't know quite yet. We're going to have to figure that out through our journey and adventure on Arrakis. Very exciting stuff. I, for one, am probably just going to get into a bunch of tomfoolery, but yeah, that's me. Looking at some of the things that they showed us here, we actually got to see a lot of the quasi-religious things going on in Dune Awakening. A lot of what I would say is Fremen spirituality. We see here possibly what looks like maybe a place of worship or an abandoned CH of sorts. You can see people hanging from the columns here, possibly water sacrifices, people that have fallen in battle. Tough to say, but we got a lot of imagery of different kind of tombs and maybe even ritual sites, places of prayer, a bunch of different iconography of varying sort of deity-like entities, a lot of sandworms, a lot of praying figures, one that even looked like maybe a Reverend Mother at a point. As you can see here, a lot of sandworm iconography. So who's to say what really is going to go down in these places? They might be a place where you start your vision quests. They might be a place where you go to finish a mission. Perhaps there's loot involved there. We don't really know. Speaking of some of the kind of more spiritual, ancient things, we see a lot of etchings and sort of wall cave markings. Hard to say where that's going to play in, but I think it has something to do with these, which I'm assuming are going to be part of the vision quests that the player undergoes. This is presumably what the player is going to do in order to increase their skill level or train new abilities with the teachers of the great schools. As you can see, everything's just kind of floating adrift in this nebulous sort of environment. It reminds me a lot of the Arkham City Scarecrow missions. We also were introduced to a new faction called the Masquerette. This is going to be a sort of radical offshoot of the Fremen faith that are extreme, shall we say, in their measures. Saw some sacrifice going on there. More mentioned about the timeline, but it is held behind a confidential screen there, so they're keeping that under wraps. But we did get to see a good look at the character creation system for Dune Awakening finally. A lot of people were asking about this, really wanted to know more, and we got pretty much the long and short of it. Expression and customization is one of the core pillars of Dune Awakening. To showcase a part of that, the devs showed off the robust in-game character creation tool. You can choose every detail of your appearance, then your home planet, and even your mentor specializations, such as Mentat, Swordmaster, or Bene Gesserit. They left out Trooper and Planetologist, but who's counting? We got to see what the main setup is going to look like. I mean, it's your standard fare for customizing a character for games like these. You get a slew of sliders, anywhere from the height of your character, arm thickness, neck length, if you're into that kind of thing, even down to like vitiligo sliders and an age slider to determine how weathered and seasoned your character is going to be in this game, which I thought was awesome. It's a nice little touch. A little bit about the facial construction, a little bit about the hair choices, makeup, little effects like that that'll kind of give your character some uniqueness when you're out in the desert. And basically, once you decide on a name for your Duner, it's time to go ahead and pick a school of training from the great houses. Eventually, you'll be able to choose an NPC to train you. We were shown 5 skill trees that can be unlocked by doing said training, which will then allow you the option of 3 techniques you can mix and match as your main attacks. That's in addition to the 3 passive skills you also can equip. To unlock all the options available will take a significant amount of time. But I expect a good bit of synergy to come from this mixing and matching of skills, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see what kind of builds people come up with out in the desert. Here you get to choose your planet of origin, and that comes with a unique emote and a unique dialogue option. So if you hail from Khitan, you actually get to have the political dialogue trait and an elegant bow, which is beautiful. If you want to pick Caladan, you become an honorable trait for dialogue, and you get the Atreides salute, which I think we all pretty much know and love at this point. I mean, who doesn't love that kind of stuff? It's satisfying. If you end up picking Chusuk, you get the option to be cultured in your dialogue, which, if I do say so myself, a bit of a fancy lad. You also get access to the musical pose. But if you go with Gady Prime, which God knows why you would, you get the deception dialogue trait and the Harkonnen curse, which, I mean, I can only imagine is either going to be something involving Sting, or possibly the cool pose that Fade does in Dune 2. Personally, I'm kind of hoping it's the Sting one, though, honestly. But here's a quick overview of the dialogue and emote choices that you're going to get. Once you finally get your place of origin and your looks nailed down, this Reverend Mother over here is going to ask you what kind of society member you are. What place in the nobility do you take part in? Are you an educated person like a bondsman here? Are you sort of na familia, as the Dune team calls it, which is sort of nobility, but not exactly the royal family? It says you're afforded certain privileges and protections with that status, so that's interesting. Or you could become a Pion, which it says here basically you live and are considered the property of their lord, which I don't know what kind of benefits that's going to come with, but we will see. Maybe it's worth trying out. After you get all that done, you finally get to choose your school of training. Now, this is where you pick pretty much your starting ability. We know most of these by heart now at this point. You have your Trooper, your Mentat, your Bene Gesserit, Acolyte, and your Swordmaster. Here you can finally read the individual options for themselves. I'm not going to read them out loud, but you're free to pause the video and go over those at your own leisure. Issue that I did have is that they still haven't unveiled Planetologist. Now, I do know that it exists for sure. We have seen in the Discord that is the 5th confirmed skill tree, it was also just shown in the clip earlier that there are 5 skill trees to choose from. And in the skill tree UI clip that we have from earlier in PAX East, there is room for a 5th skill tree option. So it has been confirmed pretty much that that belongs to the planetologist class. We just haven't heard a lot about what that entails, what kind of skills that will offer, if that's even something you can choose right at the outset. Maybe it's something that you only get access to later on in the game. But once you do finally pick one, Reverend Mother pulls you over with the voice, you get Gomjabarred, you're gonna have to pass the test. Now, to be honest, I'm failing that test every time, dude. I'm way too shaky. There's no way I'm not accidentally knocking into that thing and just offing myself. But you get to live. And then they show you this cinematic, which we have seen before. You recognize this screenshot from earlier in the year. Some kind of maybe doorway opening up to the planet Arrakis. This could be the opening of the Highliner itself, or maybe just a giant window. It did look like you had co-op action there, so maybe you get to go back to that spot at some point later in the game. We don't know. But as the tale is told, you get sent down to Arrakis on this quote-unquote prisoner ship. We don't know story-wise why that is, but I'm curious about what that is and why Arrakis looks so green? Somebody answer that for me. It's curious. Now towards the end of the direct, a lot of people have had questions about the server structure. How is this game going to function? How is it an MMO? The juiciest part of the video was the overview of the world structure. Funcom explained that there is a top-down overland map connecting the various huge maps, one of which supports hundreds of players. This choice allows the studio to expand the game more easily. Joel Bylos explains.
It's almost like choosing a server in an MMORPG, but it's a large infrastructure of connected servers, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the idea is that as a player, you choose, you join, you start in a map, and from there, your experience should be relatively seamless in terms of how you explore and feel the world.
Satisfying. And then we're treated to an actual visual aid for the server structure. You can see here that players are going to be kiting between these social hubs and these PvE zones and the deep desert. You can see the Hagga Basin there being the main place where players are going to start out. And here's the actual map laid over top of that. This overland map is how players are going to be getting back and forth between main points in the game, the different maps. Here's an actual look at what you're going to be doing on the overland map itself. As you can see, the player is using their mouse cursor to kind of guide their ornithopter around from different points of interest on this overland map. Whether or not we're able to go to places in between the main hub worlds, it's not quite known yet, but I have a feeling we're going to be able to discover new places on the map, or they will be shown to us later on. We got to peek at the deep desert where most of the conflict will happen, and hundreds of players will focus on collecting resources and fighting over key locations each week. There's the Hagga Basin, which will have a 40-player plus cap, and 2 social hub locations, Arrakis and the Harko village. Now, more is planned to be added as time goes by. They do want this game to be a multi-year thing, so we will see things develop as it goes. Let's take a look, though, at the Hagga Basin real quick. As it stands, this was the first time that we heard Hagga Basin really mentioned, but it did seem to feature a lot of the things that we have already seen as far as the environment goes. This is the Hand of Kadir, as you saw in my last video. We got to see this place again, which is reminiscent of some earlier screenshots that we saw earlier in the year. We got to see another kind of look at that, even a different sort of condition of it with the windmill there on the front gate, which is missing in other places. So it might be that it's been developed a little bit since, but interesting to me is that here's the actual game map laid over the actual Dune lore map. As you can see, it lines up, so we're placed square within this large area called the Hagga Basin, which is not just a point of interest, it's a very large part of the Dune map. There's also the Imperial Basin, which is over there, and they didn't talk about that, so I'm kind of wondering, like, what's over there, what's going on? When you join the game, you start in the Hagga Basin map, which is a server with a minimum of 40 other players. It's a place you can build, craft, survive, and progress. To me, it sounds like it's going to be kind of the spawning area for new players. Once you leave the Hagga Basin, you build yourself an ornithopter, and then you jump into the Overland map, which is how you kind of get between the main points of interest as far as these server maps go. Here we got to see some more visuals of what the Hagga Basin will look like, but again, this is just one part of the map as far as biome goes, so we haven't really been able to see a whole lot. It's said that you'll spend at least 30 to 50 hours in this starting area, so I mean, unless you're looking for a 1,000-hour game and you're cool with 30 hours on something, that's gonna be pretty satisfying. Let's take a look at Harko Village, though. This is kind of where the devious criminality stuff comes in. the dark, seedy underbelly of the world. Shouts out to that Kulan right there. Ooh, look at that still suit. Look at that Chom symbol on the saddlebag. So a lot of potential for some interesting stuff. Also, Harko Village, Hanover's bar right here, smoking Samuta in the background, doing weird stuff with whale bones. You know, who knows what's actually happening there. We got to play to find out. I, for one, am very excited about it. This was interesting, though. Mines. Melee weapons. What seem to be gauze rifles, if they are the same weapons that we're showing here. Looks like we got a better look at them on this weapon wall. Even more in detail, we got to see grenades, possibly suspensor grenades, maybe even incendiary or concussive grenades, we don't know. But that's what those are. We got to see Mala pistols, presumably. I would have to guess that that's what those are. And again, a better shot at the gauze rifles, which are shown here again. Gas powered, you can see the little gas chambers for the ammo plug-in right there. Really awesome looking stuff. Can't wait to see what other kind of weapons they let us engage with. Not sure if we know everything just yet, but excited for the gameplay video in August. A couple more shots of some things over there in Harko Village, but then we get a little bit of a glimpse at the deep desert and what that's going to look like. Now, you may say it just looks like more sand, and you wouldn't be wrong. The difference being it's a lot of sand, and it's a lot more sand than what we're going to see in the Hagga Basin. So the interesting thing here is that you're going to have to fly to this place, go out, collect as much as you can, and then survive your way back to the safe zone. We don't know how the overworld map is going to work as far as fast traveling per se, whether or not you'll have to fly all the way to the edge of a server map in order to engage with that. We just don't know yet, so we're going to have to wait and see, but it does beg some questions. Here's a little comment from one of the devs about getting a ship crashed on top of them as they're flying out to the deep desert. So if that tells you anything, it's that there is a lot of interactivity still going on within this game. So a lot to look forward to in terms of that. Here we get to see a glimpse of the Coriolis storm, or at least some form of a sandstorm. It's not really easy to tell quite yet, but you can see the real-time effects going on with the environment. The sky is going to darken, it fills with grit and sand, there's lightning going on, it looks pretty terrifying. It's going to be really tough to survive through that and make your way back to safety. So you don't want to be caught out in the middle of that. Your visibility goes to nearly nothing. And with that, we kind of reached the end of the direct. I do have some final thoughts on some things. I just want to go over real quick just to see what anybody else thinks. This is a leaked image of the map screen on ArtStation from a former designer. Here we see a Harkonnen base on the map, and this is from the concept art. So I have to guess that that's the same exact shape, and this is what the Harkonnen bases are going to look like generally. This is a note about the Graben, which is said to be one of the starting areas, or at least one of the main areas where the population takes place. This is that same image, and there's the Graben village just up there. So if all this makes sense, this is happening in the Minor Erg. And the Minor Erg is where the Hand of Kadir is, which we've already seen a bunch of times. There it is again, which they showed us as part of the Hagga Basin, but it says it takes place in the Minor Erg. The Hand of Kadir is in the Minor Erg, which is all the way over there to the southeast. So I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So we're going to have to wait and see. We really don't know. Here's some cool environment shots I think we can expect to see in the different biomes. A couple of these great glamorous shots they gave us of engagements. It looks like a group pulling up on a scavenge site. Here's a guy using a suspensor tech to float down to maybe get one over on these guys that are investigating a crashed ship site. Here's a good look at the Harkonnen armor, some Harkonnen soldiers coming through with their weapons drawn, just looking really, really cool. I also found a small note about environmental traps like drum sand and quicksand that are going to be something to look out for out in the desert, so you got to mind your step. And I hear you, you're saying Niz, but when beta? Trust me, baby birds, I'm hungry too. We did learn that following the previous limited closed beta events, Dune Awakening has recently entered the persistent closed beta phase, which is obviously a step toward the full release, allowing testers to check out the whole game. There's still no word on launch though, but you can go dancing. And we're going to be dancing it up in the clubs. Somebody's got to put all that good Samuta to use. You know what I'm saying? I appreciate y'all watching. Thanks for getting through it. Let's have a good time. I'll see you guys in August, all right? Peace.